The primary against John Cornyn. So Dwayne, come on up. We're yours.
I'll take it. Wow, this is a beautiful place, isn't it? Is this y'all's first time here?
It is.
I'll try to tone it down so everybody doesn't get blown away. I can talk pretty loud if I need to. My name is Dwayne Stovall. I'm 54 years old, been married for almost 30 years, have 3 children. I'm your every Texan from Liberty County, live about an hour northeast of Houston. I own a company that built bridges for the highway department for about 15 years. I've built bridges all over this area. We built about 60 across Texas. After 2008, when all the wonderful stimulus years started happening, we made the decision to get out of bridge building in 2012 when we figured out that 90% of our work was completion work, which was meaning other contractors going into default, and we were taking over the insurance projects for them to get them done. We started a company back in 2011 called Liberty Testing. We do oil field compliance work on pipelines, specializing in compressor stations. My resume begins with not finishing college. I got in my junior year at Texas State University, which was Southwest Texas back then. I'm old enough to remember that. And ran out of money. Got a chance to go to work for Atlantic Richfield, and off to the races I went. Something happened to me after the stimulus years and during that period of my life. I have traded construction equipment internationally since the 90s. I've been to Asia many times. I've traded construction equipment from Germany to Japan, from Canada to Australia. It gave me a really clear understanding of monetary policy and exchange, international trade, banking, and that type of aspect of how we deal with other countries. And it also showed me what our government does to our dollar and the way it affects other countries in ways that we don't ever pay attention to over here. We get the bad results of it, but we don't really ever talk about it. And during the course of this period of time in my life, it's been about 16 years ago. I was in my late 30s. I was in my office, I had a TV going in the corner of the room, and somebody got on, I can remember the issue today. I couldn't remember yesterday. Do y'all remember when Alabama passed its own laws to regulate employment of illegal aliens and illegal alien access to certain programs that were taxpayer funded, and they were really clamping down on illegals? There was a Supreme Court ruling that said, no, Alabama, you can't do that. And I was listening to one of our supposedly conservative news broadcasts that's national, and they brought their favorite attorney, constitutionalist, go-to person on there, and she said, well, of course Alabama can't do that because the Supreme Court said so. And that hit me so wrong that I literally started digging into the source documents of what created the Constitution and what got us here. Now, I don't suggest you go do that because it's an arduous endeavor, to say the least. When you get into the origins of Philadelphia, when you get into the details and the weeds of things like the state ratification debates and what they actually agreed to, it takes you a grand total of about 30 seconds to figure out that the government that we live under today doesn't represent or look anything like the government that was gifted to the Union. Not even close, folks. Not even close. So, the further I got into that, the more I realized I had a real affinity for one position, and that was the U.S. Senate position. And the reason I was drawn to that position is because it has one predominant purpose. One, and that is to protect the best interests of their state. End of story. It starts there, it ends there. There's no other responsibility they have beyond that that's greater in importance. So, I'll put it to you this way. I voted for John Cornyn when he originally went in. Shortly thereafter, I got on this personal pathway, and I started monitoring his behavior very, very closely. Let's just say way closer than 99.9% of my fellow Texans. It was so bad that in 2013, and every Texan like myself, and I am just an every Texan. I've had every job you can think of. I've still wrestled the PRCA. I've done every nominal job you can think of, all the way up through where I'm at today, and it forced me to step up from the kitchen table and tell my wife that I'm either going to stop voting altogether or I'm going to run against this man. And she did what most wives would do. She rubbed me on the shoulder and she said, whatever you feel like you need to do, honey. So I did. And 3 months later, she said, what the hell are you doing? Right? Okay. That's another story. She's very supportive. I ran in 2013, and on $70,000 in about 12 months, I garnered almost 11% of the Texas primary. Now, as in every Texan who was not overly politically motivated, understand something about my history. I'm a lifelong little r Republican. I believe in limited government and the origins of what this Constitution is supposed to do, the limits it places on the government. Outside of that, we can break up the classes of Republican Party membership into these. Those of us who are what we would call the grassroots, who are on the ground doing the work of the party, the ones who are delegates to the state convention, which I've been many, many times. Those of us who are there for the full week of the convention, and those of you that know what I'm talking about know exactly what I'm talking about, who are digging into the committees and working to get that abolition of abortion as a state legislative priority, those things. And then there is a hierarchy of the highest ends of the party that go national, who are completely disconnected from those of us who are down here at the bottom. And we refer to them so lovingly as the establishment, right? So you get people like me who go to the party conventions, go through the work, get in the trenches. I've authored 2 of your planks on your party platform. I'll put it to you that way. And then we get out of the party convention and we get a pat on the head. Thank you for everything you did. And nobody pays attention to anything we did anyway.
Amen.
Okay? So you take all of this and wrap it up into one thing, and you get a guy like me who's just done with it. I'm just over it. So I got to this point where I'm micro-focusing on John Cornyn. I knew Kay Bailey Hutchison was going out of office. I knew that. Watching him was so painful because there's no differentiation between his behavior and those of a hardcore leftist Marxist Democrat.
That's true.
His verbiage is one thing. What he does is another thing. That's where we draw the line. You have to draw the line there. Folks, I was in front of 150 people in Lano, Texas, of all places. I was going there to speak to a group that had 150 people show up. And I said, in 2014 when I ran, there was about 1.3 million that showed up to vote in the primary. Folks, that's less than 1 in 10 registered voters in the state of Texas. Less. In 2016, Donald Trump was on the ballot. How many do you think showed up at the primary? Almost 2.6 million. Over 1 million more Texans showed up to vote. Do you think they showed up to vote because they love the establishment? They showed up to vote because he was the middle finger to the establishment. So in 2018, all of us got hyper emotional because we had a Beto on the ticket, right? And he's running against Ted Cruz. So we're going to have this really big uprising. Guess how many showed up in 2018? About 1.4 million. Donald Trump drew those numbers. He ran a campaign across the state of Texas on 2 points. He's going to build a wall to secure the border, and he was going to drain the swamp. Is there anybody in this room that doesn't think John Cornyn is an establishment senior member of that swamp? Raise your hand now. I will give you the floor. We're dealing with a situation where we are being expected to accept a lie. That basically we're just going to be too stupid to see through the charade. Because he has one campaign. One. It's his only shot. And that's to tie himself to the coattails of Donald Trump as closely as he possibly can. Regardless of the fact that he works with people like Beto. I don't know if you've ever been to my website or to Texans for Stovall on Facebook, but go there. Check through the videos. You're going to see a video of Beto talking about how he and the senior senator from Texas, John Cornyn, worked together to craft legislation that basically undermines the wall. Right? He's on Tucker Carlson saying that Texas didn't vote for a wall. I don't know if any of you saw that or not. Of course, telling the national media that Trump is naive about his wall. But today, because it's election cycle, he's all Trump all the time. This is 24 hours a day now. Well, folks, like I told those people in Lano, the only difference between a hardcore leftist, Marxist, Stalinist, communist, Democrat, progressive, and our big government establishment, John Cornyn, is that I trust the Democrat. I know what they're telling me. I want your guns. I want your money. I'm going to give it to my friends. I want to murder children. You don't get any property rights. I want to grow the government. I want to expand the debt. Debt doesn't mean anything. The government should be larger. All those things, they will tell you. This is not a joke. They'll tell you flat out. You know who they are. People like Cornyn are dangerous because they go to a microphone and they go, those Democrats. Sorry, folks. Those Democrats. Another person. Those Democrats, they just want to grow the debt. They just want to grow the government. They just want to grow the size and scope of it. They just want to fund Planned Parenthood. They want to take your guns. And then he backs away from the mic and then quietly goes to the floor and he votes with the Democrats almost every single time to grow the debt, to grow the size and scope of the government, to fund Planned Parenthood. All the things that he says he's against. He's a liar. I hate the word disingenuous. Anybody gets around me very long realizes I don't speak in really long terms. We generally get to the point pretty quick. Disingenuous is just a fancy way of saying you're a liar. This is one of those situations where you can only take so much. Now, I don't want to make this into some kind of civics lesson, but the reason I run for this office is not because I want to go be more conservative than that guy, because I'm kind of done with that too. You have to know what you're doing when you get in that office. At the federal level, it's a different animal. And I'm going to explain to you what that is, what I plan to do, but I want to tell you where I'm at personally. You may share this, you may not. I'm at the point now in my life, at my age, where I'm really tired of people who get up in front of me and my family members and my community members. And we've all heard it many times. It's been weighing on me. I've been praying about it. You know, I've been asking God for guidance. I've been talking to my wife. I've talked to my kids. You know, it's been weighing on my heart, and I feel like I've been called to serve. You know what I do? They say that, and they look at you and they go, yes, sir. And you go, yeah, that's wonderful. What does that even mean? What does that mean? What do you know about the office you're running for? What do you know about its authorities? What do you know about its limitations? What's your agenda? What are you going to do when you get there? And what mechanism are you going to use to get that done? Because if you're just telling me you're more conservative than the other guy, I don't need you. If you're just telling me you're going there to get a hold of that system and you're going to manipulate it in a way that we'll like better, I don't need you. 90% of that system needs to be burned to the ground. This is where we're at. The government is too large. It's too large. If we don't start divesting power away from that government, you might as well take the state constitution of Texas and our Bill of Rights and throw them in the trash can. Hand the keys to the Pink Dome over to Washington, D.C. Call it done. Nothing we do today is as important as shrinking the power of that federal government. Nothing. Nothing. Now, not to take y'all into a civics class or anything, anybody that's here that's in the legal profession, I want you to know I don't hate lawyers. Sometimes it sounds like it. Let me tell you something. God has a sense of humor. In my adult life, I've been in business for a long time. My entire adult life, I have raised all kinds of sand about two people, lawyers and bankers. My oldest is my daughter. She is a lawyer. My oldest son is a banker. Yeah, I laughed too. I told them both. A 243 right here would have been a little simpler. But so there will always be one attorney on this planet that I'll take a bullet for. That being said, what we're dealing with is a complete abuse of Congress, both chambers of Congress. I'm going to explain to you some very simple things, and if you've got a pocket constitution, whip it out and you can follow along with me. Folks, everybody hyper-focuses on Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8. We, as a society, have been indoctrinated for over a century now in two predominant lies, but there are other lies. One of those lies is, and we all know the sequence because we all come out of school saying the same thing. We regurgitate the same noise. We have a federal government that has three co-equal branches of government. That's the biggest lie we were ever taught in school. They're not co-equal. We're never designed to be co-equal. No one ever said they were co-equal during the origins of the Constitution. Nobody, ever. The second lie is that the Supreme Court of the United States is the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere. Now I'm going to ask you as a group, and you can answer. Who does the Supreme Court of the United States answer to?
Themselves. Congress. No one.
Who says Congress? You've been watching me. You're cheating. No. She's absolutely right. I'm going to say some things and you're going to go, no way. And I'm just going to tell you, this is point blank, this is how it works. The Supreme Court of the United States literally has the authority to be involved in 10 types of cases. 10. And guess what? In Article 3, they're listed. It's a fixed list. And there's nowhere in that list that it says, oh, and by the way, any other type of case they want to take up. It doesn't say that. Understand, when we went to school, they taught us that Article 1 was written for the legislative branch. Correct. Article 2 was written for the executive branch. Correct. Article 3 was written for the judicial branch. Incorrect. Article 3 in your Constitution, that little pocketed thing, was written for the legislative branch. Next time you get out your Constitution, read it as if you're a member of Congress. Because it's the rules and strengths of the Congress over the judicial branch. It only mentions the Supreme Court twice. One is there's going to be one, and it can be one judge. By the way, all the other lower courts belong to the purview of the Congress. Whether they exist, how many there are, where they are, if they exist at all, belongs to Congress. The other statement on the Supreme Court says that they're going to have original jurisdiction over exactly 3 types of cases. 3. You know why that's important? Because original jurisdiction means that they own them. If it's an ambassador, a minister or consul, or and I'll tell you something about this, or cases in which a state shall be a party, they have original jurisdiction. That means if you're suing an ambassador of the government, you don't even have to go to your DA. You can go to Washington, D.C. and file it with the Supreme Court. They own it. There are 7 other types of cases listed. Those are appellate jurisdiction. Why is that so important? Because appellate jurisdiction falls under such rules and regulations as put forward by Congress. So this is where conservatives have been sold down the river for a century and a half. We've been sold down the river. How do we think we get rid of scourges on society like Roe v. Wade? Today, what's the only focus we have? The courts, right? So what does that relegate us to? I'm going to make a guess that the majority of the people in this room are believers. You know where we're at? We're begging for a king. Every 4 years, we're begging for a king. Lord, please give us a king that's going to give us that magic judge that's going to overturn that scourge on society and stop our sin. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. You know how it works? One member of either chamber goes to the microphone, proposes a one-line piece of legislation. That would be something new. A one-line piece of legislation.
Yeah.
It says, folks, we don't have the authority to force 330 million citizens across 50 different sovereign states to accept being business partners with an organization that murders children and sells their body parts. We don't have the authority to force those citizens to support government-sanctioned abortion and murder of children against their will. So we're going to take that off our shoulders. And as of today, we're going to remand that issue to abortion to the states, and we're going to remove any and all perceived jurisdiction from the federal judiciary. And it's gone. That's how it works. Now, the three types of cases that they have original jurisdiction over, the one that says, in the cases in which a state shall be a party, this is the example you can use. Oh, by the way, if you ever want to answer this question, I know what it is. When do you think we went off the rails following the Constitution? I've heard this conversation all my life because coffee shop talk. We all say, well, when do we? Well, LBJ or FDR or Wilson. Folks, I have a friend of mine who is he's a renowned scholar on all things Madison, Jefferson, Revolutionary. And I was listening to him at a seminar, and he got asked that question. I perked up because I've heard that question all my life. And they said, he looked very matter of fact. He's a really dry guy anyway. And he goes, 4 years. I said, 4 years? He came and sat down. He said, yeah, they ratified in 1787. They implemented in 1789. In 1793, 4 years later, there was a private lawsuit called Chisholm v. Georgia where a South Carolinian sued the state of Georgia over an estate. Private estate. I don't know if the Supreme Court was just bored or what, but they decided to get involved. So what do you think the sitting Congress, who is that close to the Revolution, that close to Philadelphia, that close to the ratification debates, and that close to the implementation of that Constitution, do you think anybody in that Congress needs someone leaning over their shoulder and explaining to them what the interpretation should mean? No. They know exactly what the authorities are. That Congress looked at the Supreme Court. Not only did they say, shut up and sit down, they wrote the 11th Amendment. So if you want to see proof of what the Congress is supposed to do, you'll look through the Bill of Rights. The very first thing after the Bill of Rights is the 11th Amendment. It says, cases in which a state shall be a party shall not be misconstrued to conclude this. See? That's how you deal with the Supreme Court. Fast forward to today. We don't live by the Constitution. And if you think we do, you got news. I got news for you. It doesn't work that way. That Constitution is a list of limits. That's all it is. It doesn't grant you any rights. It's a list of limits on offices of government. That's all any Constitution is. You have your rights. It's supposed to be protecting those rights. That's it. Keeping them out of your business. We don't live by that. What we live by is body of case rulings. Judges' rulings. Now, this is how far disconnected we are from our origins. When they formed the Constitution and they handed it over to the states and they said, here, this is what we'd like to do, the states were worried about it consuming the states, taking them over. You got the Patrick Henry speeches we all love, right? So people like, I don't know, Alexander Hamilton, who we all look at as the big government guy, if you read his words, he says any layman's, and I'm paraphrasing here, any layman reading of the document proves that the judicial branch is the weakest of all the branches. It has no mechanism of enforcement and no mechanism of self-defense. They just do this. There's nothing to them. Where are we at today? Everything goes through the Supreme Court. By the way, for your benefit, I've been going to the state capitol for, this is my 10th session. I have been in more meetings with more state representatives and state senators than I can shake a stick at. And I can tell you, when you start a conversation that's meaningful about anything of any size, legislative council or the representative are going to come at you with one question or one statement. They're going to say, well, we don't think the Supreme Court's going to go along with that. Now, what's the worst part of that statement? They're not talking about the Texas Supreme Court. They are never talking about the Texas Supreme Court. I had lunch with a Supreme Court justice here in Texas a couple of years ago, and I joked with him and said, how do you like being in a lower court? He knew exactly what I was talking about. If a Texan sues an agency in Texas or a county in Texas or another Texan over a law that was executed by the representatives of Texas in the Texas Capitol and passed and implemented here, and it goes to the Texas legislature and gets to the Texas Supreme Court, and they rule the losing party doesn't like what he sees, he goes to the Supreme Court. Now, does the Supreme Court of today say, it doesn't fall under that list we've got. It doesn't fall under our purview, so we can't take it. No, they take up everything. Everything. So, what do? Why doesn't this work? Why don't we have this going on? Well, it's got a lot to do with our social training and 100 years of case method training on attorneys. I just had a daughter go through this a few years ago. You have 100 years of every single year a brand new crop of attorneys come out of school. And by the way, if y'all haven't figured it out, Congress is run by lawyers. It's run by lawyers. End of story. They get out of school, but every state in the union has a rule, has a law that you have to take a semester of constitutional law, which is 99 and 9/10% law and almost nothing about the Constitution. So when you get a young attorney who comes out of school and you want to have a discussion with him about the 14th Amendment, no, they're going to quote you every other. It doesn't matter if it's anything. They're going to quote you Warren, Marshall, Black, Brennan, Sanders. They're going to throw all these judges at you. And if you say, wait a minute, we need to talk about Chairman Fessenden, who was over the committee over the 14th Amendment. What did he say? What did they agree to when they voted on it? They don't know anything about that. That's where this case rulings come from. So what you have is a Congress that's by and large run by wannabe judges. So they look to the Supreme Court as the final arbiter of all the things all the time. This is where we're at. So you have to wreck that scenario, so to speak. We've got to get somebody in there who's willing to articulate that message and start divesting this power away. The only way you can do that is by using the power and the authority that's in that office. We're not doing that today. Today we are acquiescent. Everybody worries about being covered up with apathy or something like that. I don't think we suffer from apathy. We suffer from inertia. We've been doing this so long, we're just kind of going this direction. Nobody really knows how to correct our path, so we're just kind of going this direction. We'll just keep going this direction. The debt, all of that's the same situation. We're just kind of going until something obstructs us. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. Now, I'm going to tell you that I have one goal, and this is selfish. There's a question I want to answer for myself. My family's been in Texas almost 200 years. We were here when it was Mexico. We fought the Texas Revolution. We have a proud history here. Texas is a very specific history that needs to be protected. And we're dealing with cultural issues too, folks, not just policy of government. We're dealing with protecting culture, and Texas needs to be protected. I want to find out once and for all with permanency, with all certainty, whether or not that federal government will ever divest itself of even 1 ounce of power. And I could ask everyone in this room, you think that government will ever give up any power? And we'd all say no. No. The problem with that is we all hold out that little piece of hope. Just that little piece of hope that, we'll just elect enough R's and they'll alter our path and things will get better. We just hold out that hope. Well, it's not that I want to crush that hope. It's just that I want to get absolute proof. So what I'd like to do is get into that office, and the very first day in office, grab the worst thing we deal with on a national level, which is abortion. It's none of the federal's business. And I'd like to hit 99 other offices and ask each one of them. I go into Bernie Sanders' office. We all like Bernie Sanders, right? And say, Bernie, we're going to remand the issue of abortion back to the states, and we're going to let the people of the states manage this issue according to their traditional moral values. And you're going to support this because I'm going to get you elected for the rest of your life. And he's going to say, how are you going to do that? You're going to go back to Vermont. You're going to get in front of 10,000 of your most ardent socialist supporters. and you're going to tell them with fervor that you're going to co-sign on this, co-sponsor this bill because you want your fellow citizens in Vermont to manage this issue according to their will, and you don't want anybody that looks like this Texan trying to influence how you do that. And they're going to applaud. And I'm going to go that 99 times, and I'm going to come back to Texas, and I'm going to ask the Lieutenant Governor to call a meeting of the whole in the Pink Dome, put them all in the main chamber, and I'm going to have one of two answers. I'm either going to say there is light at the end of the tunnel, I have a simple majority in the chamber who are willing to give up this authority, or I'm going to tell them, I know with all certainty, this is what I did, these are the people I talked to, these are the answers I got. There's absolute certainty that no one in that government, and that government will never give up 1 ounce of authority, that they're never going to take the boots off the throats of Texans. Now what do you want me to do? That we all need to hear. Sooner the better. One way or another. We need that answer. I hope it's the other. But I hope you get from me that this is not a career decision. I don't like politics at all. I don't like government much. By the time I'm 60, I'm liable to be an anarchist. So bear with me here. I appreciate the chance to come talk to everybody. If you got any questions, let me know. But I hope you kind of get the gist. I just gave you a little bit of it. It's kind of baptism by fire, I know. But thank y'all very much.
One quick question.